Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 41 of UK League Chat. Joined as always by my lovely co host Tom, and this week we're also lucky to be joined by the man robbed by us of coach of the split, Vandett0. Vandett0, do you forgive us yet, or is the grudge still there?
I don't think there was. I don't think there was ever a grudge,
Oh,
but
thank goodness. I think
Miltmer, I think it was when what Miltmer was saying.
yeah, I was going to say he's in the chat at the moment. I think he was the one that was a bit more angry about it. I even went back and found the tweet that you made, Mi'kmaq, saying, "Imagine the coach of the split isn't Vandett0. Took a team which everyone predicted to be dead last and made them go third place. Pathetic." So to be fair, I think on that episode we gave an honourable mention, said that it could have easily been you, but we'll kind of go over that because it would have kind of been rightly so. I mean, for anyone listening that doesn't know about our team of the split, it's not exactly official. It's literally just me and Tom.
No. It is
saying
official. There was no other. NLC never did
It's
one.
the most official there is, but I'm not sure it's still properly official. NLC haven't acknowledged it yet, at least.
they should.
Yeah, next time. But let's start off with that, and we'll maybe talk about the that Godsent split first of all, because that was one. Obviously, the summer split just gone, the kind of main summer split at least, where you kind of joined with this team that was pretty much just a team that was like available, that I think had like won a qualifier or something, and Godsent just sort of picked up the lineup. And then seeing that, everyone, including us, kind of predicted like dead last, and obviously we were all wrong. And you came third in that group, got into playoffs and everything like that. So to start with, when you guys were sort of seeing the tier lists and everything like that, were you, well, maybe even before that, were you picked up before that roster, or were you kind of given that and just said, look, here we go, we picked up these guys that won this qualifier, do what you can with them?
Yeah, that was kind of the situation. Yes.
What did you think? What were your expectations of it then? Were you even a bit not like hesitant, but keeping your?
No, I mean, I was excited. I mean, after coaching Vipers in spring, everybody also predicted us to be last or almost last, I guess. And I like being an underdog. I think it gives a big mental advantage as well. And yeah, I was excited. And I think the players are also, I mean, if we're going to just jump into the tier lists that were coming out and stuff like this, we were talking about them as a team and stuff, and joking a bit around and saying, oh, these lists are maybe a bit off compared to the skill level of the team.
Slightly, yeah.
I think as well, like you say it perfectly with Vipers, like because that's when I kind of first found out who you were was from Vipers, because this is a team which, like, while I was covering like the UK scene, everybody was talking about, oh, Vipers are doing really well in the Nordics, like they look like.
Oh, I think we lost you for a second, Tom.
Oh, Tom.
Uh-oh. Is he coming back? The worst thing is if he doesn't, all my OBS stuff's going to move around.
Drum roll.
Well,
but he was going to talk about or ask about something with Vipers, I think.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Oh, he's back.
Right. Yes. Oh, okay. Right. My internet went. So.
Oh.
Okay,
right.
Oh yeah. Right. Oh no, it's all gone. It's all.
There we go. Okay, we're back.
Good.
Okay,
right.
Nice.
I'll answer this quick then. I'll say this quick. Vipers were really, really good, but were, like you said, kind of a side which wasn't necessarily predicted to be as well as what they were. Now, obviously, they had, was it Den Voxnay who was at Vipers as the ADC?
Yes.
So that piqued my interest already anyway. But like, do you think that this kind of like helped a little bit? You having a side already previously, which many didn't predict to do as well as they did. So when the perception of this Godsent side came in, you were like, well, I've already had this with Vipers, and look what I've kind of proved there.
Yeah, I mean, it was just comfort, the situation, basically, right? Because, you feel like you've done it once, you can do it again. And yeah, it was, I mean, with the Godsent lineup, it was a bit different because, it it was a bit more chaotic, like the opening the closing days for the roster lock, but you know, it didn't really matter. It was just the exact same scenario with players who are kind of underrated, and you know, just gotta do our best to make them shine as much as possible.
What's the secret then? Because you've done it like back-to-back splits there that we're talking about, but it wasn't even like it was the same players or anything. It was two totally different rosters, both kind of written off. Or is there? Or can you not reveal the secret?
I mean, I can say it's a lot of work, but I also think it's like public opinion. I think like people have strong opinions about the players that they don't know, or you know, people that haven't proved too much at like making deep runs into tournaments or playoffs and stuff like this. People have ideas about them as players, but obviously, you know, we're talking about people who are playing in Grandmaster Challenger, so they must be doing something right in solo queue, right? So, you know, you just got to take, you know, the best aspects of those players and then, you know, work on them and make sure that they get as much, or I have to make sure that I get as much out of them as possible. But yeah, I think people are a bit tough on the players sometimes. That the ones that are not like famous or known.
Yeah.
I think to be fair, we're guilty of it. So when we do tier lists, like we don't know every single player which kind of comes in and comes out, and obviously we're not like, well, I'm definitely not. I'm not really good enough to kind of analyze in the sense of like mechanically, you know, by looking at their solo queue and seeing if they're good or if they're bad. So like, and we did it. I've done it twice in a row. So I did it with Barrage because I didn't know any of their players like 2 splits ago, and they ended up finishing like 3rd and had a good run in the playoffs. And then I did it with this one because I was just reading what the perception was of what other people think, and I do think that there is that kind of culture. Not even just, I believe, in like NLC or ERLs, but I just think in League of Legends at a whole. Like for me, if we kind of just look on the outside, like you look at like a player like Leader and even MagiFelix, who has this perception around them, but actually is that perception really the reality of how they are? And I think the perception of this is a team which just got picked up, you know, randomly, by, you know, what some people claimed, and because they were a 5-man already, and it was kind of like a weak kind of, you know, choice, was actually completely wrong in the end. Actually, these players did deserve to be where they were, and actually did prove that through that. But the perception was always different going in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's. I don't think that's only League of Legends, right? That's probably also a lot of other esports and sports. You know, I mean, people don't have the time to, you know, dive into each player for 1 week straight and like analyze to the fullest, right? And people usually just, you know, try to look at results and stuff like this, and yeah.
And the people who do though are the people who actually end up signing them. Like it would be wrong, I think, if teams didn't kind of look into this in terms of coaches of a potential player, and if they just looked at results instead of actually looking at play, that would be wrong. But I think that from like a general consensus, like normally it is just looking at results or looking at, for example, EU Masters. How did they do in EU Masters, and not actually how did they do when it wasn't kind of all on the line? Because sometimes you need to have both of those mentalities checked as well.
Right.
So with that, once that roster was all sorted, you joined, everything was locked. Then the groups came out for the NLC. What did you make of the kind of strength of the groups? Because yeah, when we've had different people on from each group, obviously they say their group's harder because you know, you just would. So yeah, what do you reckon there would have been any difference if we just seen Godsent in Group B, for example?
As in, we would have placed worse or better?
Yeah.
I mean, our group was the closest in the middle of the pack, right? Like we had a 4-way tie when there's 2 games left of the split, and we didn't know who was going to be second place because technically anybody could take it, and we had taken 1 game off Riddle as well, and I think we were like 4 or 5k behind Nordavind, or sorry, we were 4 or 5k ahead of Nordavind in our first game against them, and then we ended up throwing it away. So we knew that we could definitely challenge for, also based off scrims and stuff like this, but I don't think it would have changed. I don't think we would still have made playoffs if we were in the other group. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Then when the group obviously started, there was this, like we're saying, like everyone had kind of written you guys off before a match even happened, and then it was in like those first, I think it might have even been in like the first week when you guys got that win against Riddle, and
I think
and it was sort of like, I wouldn't say the perception totally shifted at that point. It was maybe a bit like, Riddle maybe weren't trying their hardest. It was Riddle's fault that game went in your guys' favour. But do you see like the team starting off as a fireman? Do you see that gave you actually any kind of help in the first few weeks? We kind of speculated, as when you guys were playing so well straight out the gates, that it could have even been part of that other teams had just been put together. Maybe they had a couple of weeks of scrims, whereas the team that you had obviously had played together a fair bit already. Do you think that had any impact on it?
For sure. I think that's also one of the reasons why we're seeing more rosters. Like Trick, for example, they had a longer project, for example, of all from 2020 walking into 2021 as well. So there's definitely something about having players playing together for a long time. So yeah, definitely an advantage for us. But every team had so much room to grow either way. So it wasn't like, we were maybe a bit ahead, but we could still outwork enemy teams and continue to have an edge in a lot of aspects of the game. But
so that was one of the things as well when we'd kind of speculated about that. I think, I'll say for myself at least, kind of had the idea that would be something that would help for the first few weeks, and then everyone else would kind of catch up, and we'd see the things actually level out. But then obviously it didn't happen. That form kept going, and then you could see that Godsent were actually just a good team by the end of it. Obviously that got you into playoffs with the tiebreaker, slightly helped by Mummus's internet.
Yeah, but, that was really sad.
Unfortunate, but then it could have ended up this way anyway. There's nothing saying that you guys wouldn't have got the third place.
Yeah, I think at least because we ended up winning the tiebreaker, right? So we would have at least won one game. Maybe. Like we did win the tiebreaker, so you could say that we could have forced the tiebreaker at least.
It's the best of what the situation kind of had. It's at least good that we kind of had that little bit of a tiebreaker. But I do want to actually go back a little bit in terms of like having the 5-man synergy and how it works. And I think you're right. I think it does definitely work when the games are really like high impact in terms of every game kind of matters, because it's quite a short season in terms of game wise in terms of going into playoffs. But there was kind of like a period like in the middle where, if I'm being honest, I kind of thought, right, okay, well, is this where synergy is kind of like gone? I think you went on, I think it was like 3 or 4 losses in a row, I think it was, or something like that. But then in the final 2 weeks, it kind of like came back up again and everything clicked. I remember like the victory against Ents, I believe, as well, which was like the second to last week or something like that. Like, was there anything that you felt that you had to adapt like through the split, or was it kind of these things would just eventually click again?
Well, that's a good question. Something that we had to adapt to during the split. I think it was just okay. Maybe my memory is a bit hazy, but the 3 games or 4 games we lost in a row, like in the middle of the split, I think it was maybe like right after we won against Riddle, in week 3, I think it was. I'm not sure.
So you beat
Singularity in week 1 or 2. We lost our first game against BTXL first week.
Then you beat Riddle, and then then you lost to Nordavind, lost to Ents, lost to BT, and then it was like, and then week 5, it was, I don't think you played. Oh yeah, week 5 was the Singularity game, the one which kind of got pushed back even more, and then since then it kind of like evened out in terms of performances ranked out. There was a big 3 kind of losses, especially like the loss against Ents, I would say, and then the eventual victory against Ents were quite pivotal, I think, in how kind of the season played out.
Yeah. I think we were actually performing pretty steadily throughout the split, despite those 3 losses right there in the middle. I think, as I said, like we threw a free game away against Nordavent. From our perspective, at least, we felt like we should have closed that with the lead we had. Against Ends, I remember it was a bit of a rough draft that we made. They had a really good team comp against ours, and we had to play really well to win that game. So, but it ended up being close. But they just ended up winning in late game because they had a better comp. And then against BTXL, that was a really close game. I remember Hatrix, he got like a massive play on the bot side when we TP'd in for a 3v2 on them, and like hyper late game with full build Azir, and he got like a huge highlight play out of that. So I think, us knowing those 3 games were so close, we knew that we were on form and we were doing the right things. We just needed to work on closing, making sure that, we needed just to make sure that we keep the concentration, keep the lead, and close it out cleanly all the way through, which is a problem I think is pretty common for a lot of teams at this level as well, keeping the focus throughout the entire game. But yeah, there was no real worries during the split when we lost those games, because obviously we were sad and frustrated with the fact that we couldn't close, but we knew that we were capable. So
yeah, exactly.
Do you think that's something that's even like especially important in this kind of format as well? Because it is obviously a really short regular season, only 10 games, and if we're saying like for you guys, obviously it didn't have like a massive hindrance in the end, but for a team that could lose a few games from not being able to close out properly, and that could be 30% of their split gone just from like a kind of a basic thing like that. So is that something you think is worth stressing, especially in this kind of format? And what do you think of that format in general as well?
I think every team has their challenges. In a format like this, you got to put, I guess, you're not going to solve all the problems when it's such a short split. So you got to make sure that you're at least like, I don't know how to say it in English. Like you got to put a bandage on it. Like
it's like work to your strength. Yeah, work to your strength, isn't it? Instead of working on your weaknesses, work towards your strengths to try and outweigh the weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. Work on your strengths, but also make sure that your weaknesses are not like so bad that they just end up completely losing you the game. So you got to spend a little bit of time with those weaknesses as well, but mainly focusing on strengths as well. Sorry, the second part of the question was
just
the format.
Yeah, just general thoughts on it.
I wish the seasons could be longer. I wish we could have more games. But I also know that a lot of the players don't feel is the same way. So it's kind of weird, but I always obviously want to play more, but I think playing 2 games against every team is pretty representative of a team's strength throughout a split. So I think it's fine.
Fair enough.
And you do have the added playoffs, isn't it? There's a lot more teams which can kind of make it into that playoff
exactly.
system. So it's still kind of, it sucks for the team like Ents, for example, because it would have been nice to maybe see Ents go into playoffs, but normally I don't think you could have said that Team Singularity and M&M deserved to kind of be in a playoff position, especially with how M&M were at the beginning and Singularity as well. So it's one of those where it's like, I kind of would wish to see more games, but you do get more games in playoffs. It's just changing that perception, I guess, because there's 12 teams. It's not 10 teams. I think if it was 10 teams, then double round robin between them all would make sense. But I think having 12 teams, making them go twice would be hard. I've already said my opinion. So I said that they should also like play one game against the other group. If you wanted to add like a few extra games, but that's again, it's kind of up to how the league kind of wants to go. And I think they like the fact that 2 groups are separate, so then they can only clash in playoffs as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of playoffs, then.
Yes, I have a lot to say about the playoff format, or not the format, like the scheduling. But yeah.
Well, first of all, then, so finished in 3rd, put you against the 4th place then of the other group, which was Barrage, and I think this was like this was like the point where I was finally like probably backing you guys when we do our like weekly predictions and everything. I was thinking, Godsent, like they're looking good, like Tom was saying about like the last few weeks, especially things had kind of picked up even more. I was thinking, yeah, this is Godsent, and then it was the 2-0 against Barrage. And
Yeah,
what do
not
you
happy
think
with
happened
that
there?
one.
Because I wasn't like even that. Oh, I wasn't like that disappointed. I wasn't thinking like, oh, Godsent shit the bed or something. I thought Barrage actually looked better than they had previously. I thought they'd kind of stepped up a bit into the playoffs as well. So what do you see that went wrong with that? Do you think it is more Barrage stepping up, or do you think you guys maybe didn't play to your best either?
I think Barrage improved significantly for the playoffs, but we had also played against them in scrims because they were obviously in the other group. So we had an idea about, our level against theirs, and I knew, and I think the players also knew that I think we were slightly favored based off our scrims like 2 weeks before that. But yeah, they had a lot of picks they're a very versatile team, especially their jungler. Pool is annoying to play against because you don't have a lot of practice against those types of picks. But one of the things that bothered me a lot was like the patch shift right before playoffs. A lot of the things that we played and knew were good got a little bit nerfed. And then, you have to adapt and you have to understand like, okay, but what is strong now? But, you have 5 days or something, 6 days. Our perspective was, a lot of the things that were strong in the patch, we didn't really realize. I remember in game 2 against Barrage, they early picked the Caitlyn because we were pinching Vox's 80 carry pool because we felt like he could only perform on those types of picks that we were banning away. I don't remember which ones it was. And then they ended up playing Caitlyn, which was super broken at that time because it just got like 4 buffs in a row, and it ended up being meta for, all the way to the Worlds patch before it got nerfed right before Worlds. So that was a bit bothersome. But yeah, I think Barrage didn't really overperform. I think they just straight up beat us, and that was really sad. But yeah.
Do you reckon you guys could have had a better chance if you'd have like lost that tiebreaker to Nordavind and then got up against Munster? Because Munster was a team like obviously in that group they had like double the wins that Barrage did. So on paper you should think that's the much harder matchup. But at the same time they were the team, like if there was one, they were kind of like the sort of super team we had in the league, really, where it was like quite big names, but then same problem that a lot of super teams have. They didn't really gel together, and maybe weren't actually players that would look good together. So coming against Godsent, that I think was like a team that was fundamentally one of the good teams, and that was something that we've seen with a few of your teams this year. For me, Munster could have even been perhaps a bit of a better matchup where they haven't got that so much synergy and they don't really play well together as a team. Do you agree with that at all? Do you think that could have been something where you would have had maybe a better chance against them?
Yeah. Yes, that's a short answer. Like we were even talking about like because we didn't like playing against Barrage, and we were like talking. Obviously we'd never do it because we were always going to play our best. But we were talking about we should really lose this tiebreaker. By the way, like because we much rather face Munster because it's just we felt also like stylistically, play style wise and player wise, it was better for us. But yeah, had to win the tiebreaker, of course. My players had to smurf, so yeah.
Had you scrimmed against Munster at all?
No, we didn't. But based off the way they played, and yeah, we were pretty confident.
And the fact that evidently, obviously, Nordavind beat Munster in the end in the playoffs anyway.
Yeah.
It's one of those though. It's you kind of in another world, like Munster could have been very, very good, like, and that's the kind of thing which could have happened. So it could have been a case of, oh, I wish we were playing Barrage instead of playing Munster if things had worked out differently.
Yeah.
I think how was it bittersweet, kind of coming up against Voxney then, especially when he locked in, I believe, was it Kaiser and then Caitlyn? Yeah. Which are, I would say, two quite well-known Voxney picks anyway. When you saw them get locked in, were you like, oh no? Or were you still a bit, was it just a bit inside of you, a bit like, I think I've seen this before?
We knew, I know the Voxter, right? And I knew he was going to play the Kaiser, and we knew that he was going to play the Kaiser in that game 1. And we were very confident in Senna's brokenness. Not only in the matchup but also just overall. So we were very happy with playing Senna into it. it didn't end up working out. But yeah, that was fine. But then for game 2, we were like, okay, no more Kai'Sa. And then out came the Caitlyn that was in her most broken state in a while, right? So, and that was a night, like, yeah, that game was rough. But yeah, it was personal for me and the Bucksna, I think.
Sorry to say, I think it was our fault as well, because we had an episode. I don't remember if it might be when Frumi was on as well. I don't remember, but we talked about it was the patch where those Caitlyn got like a +3 AD buff, and we were just saying just get Denvoxley on Caitlyn and Barrage won. So sorry about that. I think it was just us.
Wait, let's just point this out though. Denvoxley didn't get a kill on Caitlyn in that game. Yeah, he went like 0. I think I just checked. It was like 0-8. So yes, we are like hyping up this Caitlyn, but I guess it shows how broken the fact that an ADC cannot get a kill and still be viable in a game at that point. But
yeah,
true.
Yeah, the Caitlyn was annoying for sure. Yeah,
but overall, like how do you feel then, kind of? From what was at the beginning of that split to the end, like, do you think that you had like achieved what you could at Godsent? Do you think that overall, do you think that you kind of changed the perception of what that roster was?
Yeah, I think for sure we changed the perception, and obviously we were very happy with making playoffs. We wanted to go further in playoffs than we did, for sure. I think we were confident in basically playing any team except maybe Fnatic Rising, because we had played BTXL in the groups, and we'd seen them play against Riddle, and we'd seen us play against them in the second game of this regular season against them. I mean, first game they ran us over, right? But second match we were doing pretty good, and as I described earlier. So we were confident in basically facing most of the teams except Fnatic Rising. We knew it was going to be tough if we were going to meet them at some point, but I definitely think we could have gone further. I think it was largely due to the lack of adaptability based on the patch those last days up until the playoffs. I think we could have done more in preparing for the newer picks and understanding the patch better. I think we kind of dropped the ball in that regard, which is a little sad. But obviously we were sad, but also very happy with proving everybody wrong and stuff. But we already proved everybody wrong when we got third, and then it was like, okay, now it's time to like go big, because now we got everybody silenced. Now we want to make them facepalm. I don't
know. More silent. What is it like then? So when there's, because when that happens, obviously when new patches come out on like the live servers, competitive leagues don't always update straight away, because obviously, like we're kind of hinting at, or that you're mentioning, that teams know they're kind of working on that previous patch and can be disruptive to change it at the wrong time. So when there is a patch like that, when there's like a new patch on live, but then your team is still on the old one and you're still scrimming on the old one, how do you kind of work your time with that then? Because obviously I'd imagine part of you wants to be getting more used to the new patch, maybe even trying to do some scrims on there, because you want to know the meta better when it does upgrade, when the competitive goes up. But then obviously at the same time you don't want to fall behind on the previous patch you're already on. So what is it like trying to balance that?
I mean, it's tricky, right? You want to play. The patch is going to change in maybe 2 weeks or something when you're playing in the NLC, and you're like, okay, we need to start working on, understanding this next patch better, but we also need to continue to play on this patch, where we need to practice these things continuously to get better at them, right? So it's a fine line,
especially with how close I think that your like table was as well. I think that there's a chance of kind of like other teams maybe being like, right, we can focus a lot more kind of on the new patch, which is kind of upcoming. But I think with the kind of things with how close your like regular season was, it must have been quite difficult, I think, to balance everything.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, because every game was really, really important for every team. So obviously you need to put more focus on the games that you're actually going to be playing than rather than looking into the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Team at the top of the table like BTXL or maybe Riddle could have been, they got more breathing room and an advantage in that way. One sec, my girlfriend's in my room.
All right,
so,
can you keep talking? Yes,
no, I could talk. I could talk for days. We're okay. So, I want to kind of though mention a little bit about with you, Lee. It's like, which one of the players would you say stood out the most in that Godsent roster? And then we'll throw it over to Vandett0, and then we'll see if he believes that our opinion is correct.
I think we'd probably have the same one, and it's one we talked about. I think with our Dusty rundown in the latest tier list was Cboi. Yeah, I think it's partly comes from the fact that we're talking about how, and we talked about on previous episodes how kind of well oiled it looked like Godsent were, and how the sort of team play and everything looked so good. I always kind of imagine, and without sort of seeing comms and things, it's hard to know for sure, but I always imagine that the jungler would have a big role to play in a team like that, where they are going to be involved in basically everything and what we're doing at this minute and who needs to be here, where. So I always kind of imagined that Cboi would have had a large part in that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, I always kind of attributed a lot of the success to Cboi. Not saying that the other players weren't putting their weight as well, but he always stood out to me as probably the strongest part.
Yeah, Cboi was our main shot caller, which is actually interesting. I haven't mentioned this yet, but when we started the team, or when the team came into being, we didn't really have a leading voice, and nobody was really well enough equipped to do that. And I started working with Cboi on these things and started building him up as the main shot caller for the team. And it took a little time, but he has been used to being secondary shot caller, so you just need to, step into that bigger role and have the trust of me and his teammates and all those things that you do as you slowly implement a primary shot caller.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he was the main shot caller, and he was basically deciding everything in game based off information given from teammates, and he was a huge factor in Godsent's success for sure.
Mm-hmm. Then it's probably kind of a good segue then to the Dusty roster for the Fall Open that's just finished up this last week. So with this one, you're saying like with Godsent, the team was kind of there, and then you came on board afterwards. This time around, did you have much say in the roster, or was it another one where you kind of joined towards the end?
This time I had a much bigger say, for sure. Yes, I was deciding with Dusty on the players that we were picking up.
So then, no surprise that Cboi came back then, I suppose.
No surprise for Cboi coming back. Yeah, I mean he had worked with. Yeah.
Oh no, go
on. He had worked with SMS as well previously, so he knew a lot of the. Well, he knew Steen and he knew Click as well. So there was like synergy between 2 or 3 members. Whenever you looked at one member, that person had a connection to either me or one of the other players, right? So we tried to make sure that we already had some of that built-in synergy, both like in game, but also, personality-wise. So people were meshing really well, and we could start, moving towards improving fast instead of, spending too much time on, or not too much time, but more time than needed on meshing the team.
Mm-hmm.
So yep, that was a conscious choice.
Because even Paulson, wasn't it? I believe he was at Vipers with you as well, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. So it was kind of getting these kind of familiar faces. And do you think that kind of, again, like to get like these familiar faces kind of together and kind of focus on that synergy, that's especially important in what is a cup tournament? Essentially, it is very much a. I mean, the group stage was a knockout tournament in a knockout tournament. So like. How kind of then important was it to think, right, okay, let's get people who kind of I know and I can trust in my ability right now, because it was quite a short turnaround as well, I'm guessing, in terms of finding these players for this competition as well. And then also realizing, can these guys click together? How hard was it to kind of work out that roster?
it wasn't that hard to work out the roster. I think I and a lot of players that were either already on the team or were like basically confirmed for the team that we were already talking to. Boys, for example, we kind of knew what we wanted to do with the team. And then we talked to some of the other players, and they kind of also wanted to play with, they had some options, and I had some ideas about what we wanted. And then it was like, oh, these fit. And then it was like, okay, let's look at these first. And then it was just instant. It just clicked instantly, and it was the right choice. It was, I don't know, like love at first sight. I don't know. It's it was kind of a weird situation because it was just like, okay, this is the exact roster we want, and I worked really hard to get it. It's not always easy, getting everything that you want because there's deadlines and other teams pulling and tugging at the players as well. So it was kind of lucky actually that we ended up getting everything that we wanted. And also not only me and the organization, but also every player was really happy with the choices that we ended up having for each role. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, that's perfect. And then so I'm guessing Cboi was always going to be the choice. The way that I was saying before as well is the fact that, like, especially if you'd taken the time to kind of make him into this kind of team leader, it would seem obvious then for you to be the person to try and drag him in to get into another team as well, because there's that thing of what's the point of creating something and then you've got the opportunity to kind of bring it back. You're like, oh, no, especially if you believe in that project as well as a whole. And I think definitely like Cboi definitely developed as a player, I think, throughout this way. And even with Dusty as well, while I don't think it was ideal of what you were expecting in terms of the Fall Open, we'll go into a little bit more about that anyway. There were still like positive performances, I think, from near enough every member which actually played as well, at least at some part in the tournament.
Yes. Just in regards to the Cboi and pulling him in for the project, I mean, it was, it's not only about friends and friendship and knowing each other and work with people before, but I obviously wouldn't have pulled in Cboi if I didn't obviously trust in him and trust in the process that we were going through. But also I wouldn't have pulled him in if I didn't think that he was a great jungler. Just overall, he's very flex. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into a decision like this, but he was just a perfect fit in regards to what kind of communication we needed, what type of player he was, very versatile as well. Personality-wise, also meshing with the former players and having a lot of connections within the team as well. And as you said, during the tournament, a lot of the players had standout performances. Everybody got a moment to shine, or more than one moment. But we did end up with a result that I don't think everybody was super happy with, including myself. But still, good result, but should have been better, I think.
Well, looking at those results then, so when the group even just first came out, obviously the group draw was like basically just random, so there was no sort of seeding or anything. And to be fair, there probably wasn't much way they could have done any seeding, but then it did get what was on paper. It looked like quite lopsided groups. So, for example, Group D, your group, you would have on paper thought that pretty much anyone in Group D would have fancied themselves getting out of Group B, which was like the one that was more of like the like lower division teams. So when those groups came out, then was there, obviously I'd imagine you still would have been fairly confident still to get out of the group, but did you think a bit like, oh shit, this, wish I was maybe in a different group? It's not.
We've
not
got
the easiest
two
one
Nordovans in our side.
Yeah, exactly.
I think everybody wanted to get drawn into Group B. But I mean, we were happy with the group when we got it. It was like, okay, yeah, this is winnable. I mean, I don't want to. Some of the players were a bit cocky, I think, but yeah, we were very confident when we saw the group draw, and we were like confident that we could be first out of that group. Even though people were on tier lists saying that we wouldn't be getting out of that group.
Oh no! I'm gonna say this now. I was full of praise for Dusty I was like, this is the right like changes which they've made. We've got Cboi, but then yes, I did say, oh, but they're not going to make it out of the group though. I may remember saying that.
But that was because I think that was because of Nordavind Black, was it the one that like the main Nordavind team, which especially didn't play as well as everyone thought they would. So, well, I'm going to give us a pass on that one, Tom. That was all right.
No, you can't give us a pass. So we were clearly wrong. They topped the group. They topped this group. Right?
True.
Like if you'd finished second, then I'd be like, okay, maybe we can have a pass. But they topped. They beat both Nordavind sides. But this is what I actually do want to bring up. Were you kind of glad that Trix lost their first game? Because like I would have considered like Trix like the top team in that, and then Nordavind White ended up kind of, I would say, upset them, if I'm being honest.
Yes.
So were you kind of happy when you saw that Nordavind White had gone through and it wasn't Trix who had ran back their entire roster and were considered one of the favorites, really?
I mean, our perspective on Trix was that they were the stronger team out of the two, and we were very surprised. I was at least very surprised when we weren't going to be facing them in the winners game thing.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, like, how good is Nordavind White really? Like, because they were, in our eyes, the weaker of the four teams in Group D.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, wait, what actually happened in the series? And you had to go over it and look it all through. And then after watching the games play out, we were like, okay, we can, like, shouldn't underestimate them because they just beat Trix, but we're very confident that we're the stronger team against these guys. But it was, I mean, just like, I wouldn't say anybody got nervous or anything. It was just like, you second guess yourself for a minute, like, wait, is it Nordavind White actually really good?
Mm-hmm.
And they were good enough to be tricked, but I don't think they were like a team that was so good that we had to really play our absolute best to beat them.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that then kind of like winning that first round, because I believe it was 2-1 in the end, and I believe that you won the first game, was that kind of like not like kind of that realization of, okay, well, we beat them in the first game, and even though you'd lost the second game, there was kind of a little bit more like relaxed in that you kind of knew what the playing field was as soon as that first game had kind of come through?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what happens sometimes with, I mean, I do know, but the details of it is kind of tricky. But like sometimes when you win the first game, sometimes subconsciously you'll start to relax a little bit more and be a little bit too confident maybe. And I think that's kind of some of the things that we suffered from against Nordavind White in game 2, because we had a great game. We were playing our comp well, and I mean, for the most part, and we were far ahead as well once again, but then we just couldn't close it because we were obviously making some mistakes, being a little bit too cocky, I guess, or relaxing subconsciously, which can be dangerous. But I mean, Nordavind White was obviously the best team in between the two Nordavinds, right? So they definitely made us sweat for it after game 2, because okay, we have to close this out. We are the better team. We can't. We want to get past this weekend with no more games, because we don't want to show more of our comps. We don't want to. We want to get a little bit of a relaxation period before the playoffs start and stuff like this, so we can regroup and watch the games and stuff like this. So, and then we did end up getting a really, what do you say? I don't want to say one-sided, but a comfortable win in game 3.
Yeah. Then, what did you make of the format of those groups? Because it was one that we hadn't really seen in. Well, I'd never even really seen a league form of. Well, those groups sort of being like mini leagues, but some sort of grouping format like that. I had to because I remember it was called like GSL format or something like that, and I remember seeing it on the announcement of the Fall Open. I literally had to Google it to see what it was, but then it kind of seemed good because it's first of all best of 3s, so you don't really get many like upsets. You would generally get the better teams winning, and then like a lower bracket within that, so those teams, if they do get an upset somehow in a best of 3, they've then got extra chances. So would you see that format popping up in more places? Because it seems like, in terms of like fairness and making sure the best teams go through, it seems really good. I'd say maybe the only thing is that for like casual viewers, it might be a bit complicated and a bit confusing to actually sort of understand it and follow it. But at least from participating in it, is that a format that you liked? Would you like to see that adopted more?
I like the format. I think it was a great format, and I think I mean, obviously you want to try to play against every team also in your group, and you want to try to play more. I mean, that's just like the competitor mindset, right? You want to play as many teams as possible, but in terms of fairness, I think it was very well done. The only small issue was just like the time scale in which it was played, because some people had to play 3 games in a row, I think it was. I don't remember exactly, but it was just over, a short period of time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah.
It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then, it was. Oh, gosh, I just realized that.
Yeah. Which is, a lot of best of 3s in a very, very short amount of time. If you're, if you win the first one, and then like Northern White, for example, like I don't remember, they lost to us, and then they had to play against. No, they lost us. Then they had 1 day break, and then they had to play Sunday again.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and yeah, that's rough. I think to play so many best of 3s, because there's so much prep going into those games, and yeah, if they just space it out a little bit more, it would have been really, really great.
Yeah, it's difference between it's 6 extra games, isn't it, in 2 days, potentially. Because if you just made it straight through into the top of the group, then you played Thursday, Friday. Then if you were in the lower brackets, then it was guaranteed Saturday, Sunday, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Then moving on from the group, there was then like a bit of a draw for the knockouts. And what did you make of the draw? Would you agree that it was like maybe the nicer side of the bracket that you guys ended up on? Because it was basically before, well, sort of heading into knockouts, everyone kind of thought it was between Barrage and Tricked probably to win the whole thing as the main 2 favourites, and they were obviously against each other in the other side. So you kind of imagined, well, a lot of the sentiment was that whichever of the teams won that game was just going to breeze through their side of the knockout and probably win the whole thing. And then when we were sort of looking at it, looked, for a team like yourselves, it looked to be one of the stronger teams on that other side, and maybe would have been happy for that draw. Is that something was that true? Were you kind of pleased with it?
We were happy about, not having Barrage on our side of the bracket, because we were pretty certain that we were going to be the finalists against them if we were on either side of the bracket. Obviously that didn't happen, but that was how we felt at the time, according to like the strengths of the teams when they were drawn into the brackets. So yeah, happy to see Barrage on the other side. Tricked, I mean, we saw them play against Northern White, and making the quote unquote miracle run through after losing. But we knew that we were stronger than them based on what they'd showed in the Group D games. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't really, I mean, there was no team that we feared, but we knew like we had like a list of teams that we were. I guess there was only one team on that list, but just Barrage that we knew that that was going to be a rough game against them. Not that we couldn't win, but it's just like it was going to be close because they could challenge us. I think that was like the sentiment.
Then on your side, then obviously you had Vikings first, and that seemed like a pretty easy matchup. To be fair, like on paper it kind of looked in your side, and even just the form before it looked quite heavily in your favour. And then you came up against Envision, who I think it was when we had Prosfair on. I think he'd said like he sort of absolved getting through to the final from that side. So like even Envision looked like they'd maybe upset.
No, did I say right? I don't want to get this wrong. Because so the way that it was is that I should have checked this because I haven't had a chance to be smug. But I think me and Prosper basically said whoever would win out of Absolved and Envision would make it to the final. But for me, like the way that I saw Envision, is Envision for me was a really well built squad, and it was really good to actually see like Dusty versus Envision, I think, together, because while you saw, I looked at one side and it was the run it back kind of like angle of you had like Ents, Barrage, and Tricked, who basically had all the exact same squads. And then I saw kind of Envision and Dusty in particular. And I thought these are two sides which have built teams specifically for kind of this tournament and to kind of like progress through that. How did you expect kind of going into Envision? And did you expect them to actually be as good as I think what they ended up playing, to be fair?
I mean, we knew Envision pretty well because we scrimmed them a lot. Obviously not when we got to the same side of the bracket, but we knew of their power level. And I mean, we weren't worried. Obviously, I always make a point out of, you know, having respect for every single team that we face in competitive. And in scrims is obviously very different compared to, you know, the real deal performing on stage. I mean, our expectation was that, you know, this was going to be the team so far in the tournament that was going to be the strongest that we'd faced so far. And we would have to, you know, play our best to win. You know, we were going to take 100%, and hopefully that was going to be enough. And I don't think we played our absolute best on the day. There are a lot of factors going into it, and I also talked with Phillison obviously about it because he was on Godsent back in the day, and it was like the Godsent bros versus one Godsent bro, and it was like, you know, it was personal once again. But yeah, it stings really. It still stings. I watched the games a bunch of times after we lost as well, and it was just like there's so many uncharacteristic mistakes from our side, and I think it had something to do with just a bad day. I think, you know, sometimes you just have an off day.
I think especially like you look at the first game, I think, which was a game which I would say up until like the kind of the conclusion of it was very much. I would never say that there was never a point in both the games where it's like, right, one team stomped and won. It was actually quite a competitive game. Just one team had the advantage over the other. But then obviously that kind of shifted at the end of that game into Envision's favor. And then the second game was a little bit more of you trying to catch up with Envision, and unfortunately just couldn't end up doing it. But what I actually enjoyed though about these games is that it kind of shows that a 2-0 doesn't necessarily mean a stomp. Like, and I think there's this perception that you've got 2-0, which means that it was terrible. But actually there were two quite close competitive games, at least for a large part of it anyway, which I felt. And that's why it's like I came out of this, I'm like, it's a semi-finals. It was the chance to get to a finals. Both teams obviously, I would say, definitely performed, and in some people's expectations overperformed what even the perceptions were. And I don't think anybody kind of went out of this series looking bad. I think that, and there's a case sometimes where a team can look bad coming out of a series, and this was just generally a good game of League of Legends, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we could have gone to 3 games for sure. Based off the early games, we were ahead in both games, I remember, if I remember correctly, and we ended up, you know, squandering it. Like we took some silly, we made some, well, in the team we called it silly mistakes. So we made some silly mistakes, and you know, it's just about, you know, keeping the focus for an entire game, and also comfort of the stage. Maybe, you know, the fact that this was going to be our first true test in the tournament also played a factor. There's a lot of things going on in the subconscious of the players when you're this like so close to your goal of the final as well. So there's a lot there. But I mean, I keep playing in my head, you know, the biggest mistakes that we made in game 1 and game 2, like over and over in my head. Like it still burns. It's gonna burn for a while, I think, because I really wanted that final. And I think stylistically against Barrage, we were looking pretty good. We also played against them in scrims, and we're doing good.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask. Would you have seen yourselves doing better than Envision then? Because I think, you know, those of us watching the final even probably thought Envision did pretty well to take a game off them. Like, that Barrage team is obviously the same roster that Riddle had. Everyone thought they'd walk the whole tournament, and they pretty much did up until that point. Like,
I don't think it was as I'm gonna say this because I think a lot of people have said this actually. I don't think Barrage necessarily stomped this as much as what people expected, because like especially like I think you look at the Ents game as well. I don't think that they were like when they were comfortable they won, but they still lost the game against Ents. You know, and I don't think even in the group stages they were particularly like they were not this unbeatable monster. And I think Envision kind of even highlighted that. And while I cannot dispute that, like, yes, Barrage were the favourites and Barrage won. Like, for me, they didn't walk this entire competition because at the end of the day, they still had challenges, but I don't think it was because Barrage were bad. I think it was just everybody else, in my opinion, actually was better than what I expected kind of going in, especially like the likes of Ents, which I think grew. I think they look very, very much stronger than what they did in the NLC kind of in the actual NLC regular season. They had that time together, they developed, they ran it back. And maybe the only one I could say was maybe Tricked, kind of disappointed. But I think a lot of the other sides were either strengthened. You had a team like Envision, which wasn't there before. I wouldn't say that Barrage necessarily walked it, you know, really. But it's a lot of perception what people are saying as well, though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that sentiment. I think Barrage wasn't looking as like completely above the rest of the teams as people were saying, right? So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think I mean maybe Envision could have taken more than one game. Maybe they could have taken the final if they had a better day. They obviously took one, so you know, but just couldn't find the success for the rest of the series, I guess. But you know, not like Barrage was just smashing everybody or anything. You know, they were mortal.
Because I believe it was I think it was game 3 as well. I can't even remember that fully, but I know that wasn't like a stomp. I think both kills were in like the high teens or the high 20s and stuff like that. So that was quite a back and forth game from what I can remember. Like Envision gave them a fight, and I appreciate that because I think there was this kind of thing of like I saw Envision Barrage, and I think like everybody else, we were a bit like, right, well that's Barrage winning. So actually tuning in, while the result, I could look at it and be like, oh yeah, this is a Barrage victory. It was a lot more competitive, and I think Envision as a whole, to be fair, I've got to give them props because they built a squad for this tournament. They made it to a finals, and they definitely gave it their best shot as well. I felt, especially for a team which isn't an NLC team. Like they didn't have to kind of do this. There was this whole perception of should regional league winners be put into the NLC Fall, and teams like yourself with Dusty have to qualify essentially. And I think Envision was one of the teams which kind of showed they did deserve it because they've actually then invested into that and pushed themselves, and that built their brand a little bit more, I think, as a result.
For sure. I think it's sad that Envision didn't get more credit, I guess, for their great run in the fall here. I think, it was really, really an impressive run that they had. And yeah, I mean, I guess I could just kind of relate that to Vipers as well in spring because, people were impressed with our run, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It was kind of like that bias of like, oh, maybe it was just a fluke with them, even though they did get first we got first in the regular and then we got to the final, right? But yeah, big props to Envision. They completely outperformed all expectations.
I think it's the issue with finishing second, isn't it? Like like it's the fact of like this team which was predicted last, while even though it got second because it didn't win and it isn't the story at the end of it, that doesn't mean that team hasn't performed exceptionally well. I think that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Could maybe even make the argument for like Riddle back in the summer, like having beaten Excel in the playoffs, like finally a proper like academy killer, not just an odd regular season game. But then obviously finished second, went to EU Masters, got shafted by the seeding, and then dropped out of that. And it's no one's really going to remember it much past that, to be honest. So yeah, a bit sad. In that case,
we will remember.
Yeah. So after those few teams, then where you've kind of like you're making a name for yourself of like getting these like underdog teams and going beyond the odds and whatnot. So what kind of side are you looking for for next split then? If we're looking towards 2021, have you had any offers yet, or have you made any kind of decision where you might be, what kind of team you want to end up on?
Well, I haven't made a decision, but I have some offers, some interesting offers. It's obviously going to be super interesting for 2021 because it's going to be probably bigger and better than summer. And the NLC has probably learned some stuff after their first real split, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we're going to see some improvements, which would be great, I think, because I could name some spots where maybe we could improve a little bit. In like planning of playoffs and stuff like this, but
scheduling as well. I think
scheduling,
something.
Yes, commercial stuff as well. But yeah. I think also in regards to this huge overhaul of league in the preseason here, it's going to be really interesting to see, like, because back in 2019 when the new runes were introduced and stuff like this, right? Like, now we're in the end of 2020 and those runes have kind of been figured out. Like, we all now know, like, okay, what are the best runes for each matchup and stuff like this. I think there's going to be a while before these items and all champs like builds are going to be figured out, and I think that's going to make some really interesting things happen in the early parts of 2020. So it's very exciting.
Could you see that, like, with the item changes, that it could even have, they may have to even change a bit of coaching style or what you would focus on? Because with like we've been talking about with these teams you've had, you have kind of always looked like the team that is sort of well drilled, good, work well, move across the map together, and perhaps like we're saying, Cboi maybe plays quite a big part of that as well. But then one thing that pretty much I'm sure most people see, even just at like any level of solo queue, is maybe at the moment where people are like testing the new items and stuff, it's just like quite erratic, just it's very bloody, and that is at the moment with like solo queue. But do you see that perhaps leaking into competitive even for the first few months, and would you see that you'd have to maybe change any kind of style around that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be completely different coaching a team in the end of here 2020 fall, NLC Fall, and then also the starting of 2021 is going to be some completely different things that we're going to be focusing on, because now the game has to be completely relearned. And like how, I mean, a huge part of the game is playing around item spikes, right? But understanding those spikes and stuff like this is going to be a major focus, I think, for a lot of teams. Hopefully I can end up on a team which has, like, that's kind of a priority for me, which has solid fundamentals and like all the things like worked into them, communication, and just all the things that you need to be a competitor in an ERL, so that you don't have to start building on that, and then you can actually focus on the new patch and all the new changes that are actually happening. Because I think, that's going to give a lot of teams an edge if they start to figure out the patch faster than the others.
So that basically means wherever you end up, Cboi is getting a blank check.
Yeah, maybe. No comment.
I've got a good roster. I think it's Champion, Cboi, Multmer, Hoyes, Pedersen. I think that's the roster. That's the roster.
Definitely.
Could happen.
With that, then, I think we're kind of nearing the end of the episode. Is there anything you guys wanted to touch on? Any other topics you had in mind?
I thought about one thing about Barrage. I'm pretty sure they didn't have a coaching staff. I think they were only scrimming like 2 times a week. So, with that in mind, we're all talking about, or we three were all talking about the fact that, they weren't looking as strong as maybe people had expected. But to be fair, they weren't at their absolute maximum level, right? Because they were only scrimming, not that much, and I'm pretty sure they didn't have coach. So that makes them pretty scary as well, right?
I don't know about the coaching situation, but what I know about kind of what it was with that kind of roster is that roster just wanted to play together. It was a case of, let's just play together as a competitive roster and do this tournament. Yeah. And Barrage were the team which kind of said, yes, we'll do it. Essentially, they probably they probably went around other teams as well, possibly, but Barrage was the one which got it. They convinced them, and it looks good for Barrage because Barrage now have won.
Yeah.
It looks good for the players as well because them 5 knew that those 5 worked well together. I was so surprised that roster, that entire roster got picked up because of the amount of games that Riddle roster had to play. I just thought that they just wanted to take a break, but no, apparently they wanted more games, and that's what it kind of was for them. But I think that with the rumors of, obviously, I don't want to talk too much into like transfer rumors and stuff like that, but obviously there's the rumors on Maxi specifically, which I kind of hope isn't true, because I really want to see these players again, obviously in the NLC. But I believe, is it Maxi possibly might be going to like the LFL, I think it is, or like a super team over there.
Yes. So
it'd be interesting to see kind of where some of these players, obviously now we've got like Fnatic, the rumors of Fnatic's roster basically being blown up. XL's roster, it's announced, I think we should probably talk about this, announced that Sendo obviously has left XL now, so that's going to be a completely new change of what's happening there. There's like rumors of Orome. Was it Orome?
Orome,
yeah, Orome,
which is like mental, like
insane.
Especially that Mad Lions team. Like everyone was like praising, they've gone all rookies, it's so amazing, and then they like did a bit crap at Worlds. It's like, okay, two out of 5 of them gone, and then they didn't even get other teams as well. So like him and Shadow is rumoured to be just out of the league entirely and down to ERLs now.
Insane, absolutely insane.
It's mad.
That is insane.
Kind of like what we were talking about earlier about like the perceptions of people, like how they stick so much. Those are bloody quick perceptions for them to just be like banished from having a couple of weeks of a bit of dodgy play on like the biggest stage possible. So it's pretty nuts. But then not too bad for us if we see a Orome drop down. It should be an upgrade on Sendo. So
could be interesting.
More more competitive leagues.
I don't know what to think about if we see Orome in the and obviously and this is pure speculation. I know absolutely nothing, but obviously we don't know about the situation that's happening with Nemesis. We know that MagiFelix is looking for offers. I think that's already come out now. He said that he's willing to role swap, and I'm like, of course he is. He's a challenger in every single role. Of course he's willing to role swap. But then there's the possibility of maybe does Nemesis just stay at Fnatic Rising essentially, because Nemesis looks like he's not potentially got a team right now. So we could get Orome and Nemesis both in the NLC, which would would be so crazy.
Yeah, it would be crazy, like in so many ways.
But I guess though that's kind of a positive with the ERL system in a sense, where it still gives those players a chance to impress. But then I'm guessing for you as someone who hopefully will be staying in the NLC, like that kind of gives you someone to kind of be like, right, well, we get to play against these players and let's see kind of what the skill is against these players as well. And I can guess that being quite a good challenge for a coach and also the players as well.
Definitely. Very excited to play against the academies again. Yeah. Especially if they get, former Worlds players on their teams and stuff like this. Makes it more exciting as well.
I feel like that was the thing with Kasing. I think that's why Kasing was so great, I think, for BTXL, is the fact that he had that experience, I think, into the BTXL roster as a whole. But then also, like, we heard, like, supports and, like, we just love kind of getting the chance to play against Kasing. It was that allure of actually teams, bot lanes going against Kasing as well, because he's that well-known name and that well-known figure. And I think you kind of see that a little bit with Yellow Star, I would say, for LDLC as well. I think that Yellow Star helps the LFL a little bit because there's that star name presence and people kind of want to face up against him and that motivation, which drives them to become better. Because I don't think a player loses that work ethic, they do lose the work ethic sometimes, but like in terms of the mechanical ability and the knowledge of the game, I think that most of the time always stays. So if you can always learn off the predecessor, that's always going to make you, I think, better.
For sure. But I mean, it's also about the fact that they were just at Worlds, like Nemesis and Orome. Orome. Yeah.
Like, so the Orome one is the one which seems more likely. I don't know about the Nemesis one because but right now, like, there's no rumors circulating that he's got a team. I think he was still under contract. I don't think it was like his contract had ran out.
Yeah, it would be like a buyout situation if someone would take him. But then
and then with Nemesis leave, as soon as MagiFelix kind of announced that he's looking for offers, that was kind of like that's when I started thinking of things going into place. So I might have to send a message to LEC Wooloo essentially and be like, look, these little things are happening.
Well, because with Nemesis, like yeah, they're saying they're trying to get a buyout, or they're saying that's like the rumor. But then I think every LEC mid is like seems to be locked in. So then, if no one's going to pay his buyout, do they just let him go for free, or would they then? The only option would be to drop him down to the NLC, wouldn't it? So,
which isn't uncommon.
Yeah.
We've seen it before. We've seen it with a lot of teams. Like XL, obviously the first season they did it, didn't they? Yeah, we saw Hyun and Kasing down there, and Special obviously went up. So there's obviously kind of things of where you can go up and down in between. And I do think overall, like, academies are going to start being a little bit more like that, because I feel like academies, as it goes on, they're going to try and want to be more developmental, more kind of having the mixture of experience and talent. And I do think that overall that helps the ERLs as well.
Yeah. Definitely.
I needed to get that, man. I needed to get that how stacked the NLC could possibly be, but also how sad it could be as well with some players leaving. But
yeah,
xMatty looks to be out, like one of the few UK players left.
Dan as well, reportedly is well done. Hope potentially for actually getting going to the LEC. Yeah, it's gonna be I think it's gonna be so weird. I think there's going to be I think you're right, Vandett0. I think there's going to be like quite a massive change. I think, especially in the NLC, because there's a lot of players going elsewhere. It seems, whether it be like to a top ERL, in other regions, or even in like the LEC as a whole.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, I think we may as well wrap it up there then. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Vandett0. It was good to have you on, a first appearance, and I'm sure, if you're sticking around the NLC, I'm sure we can have you back on again next split, hopefully. Hopefully with another successful split as well. So yeah, anyone that's
thank you.
No problem. Anyone that's been watching on Twitch, then I know we've got a few people I think still lurking around. We had a few followers throughout the episode as well. Bebop Bully followed. You did obviously Vandett0 before, as well as Mikma. So thanks a lot for those. And we had a resubscribe from 101 Games as well. Thanks for that. And then anyone else that's still knocking around, if you haven't already, do feel free to follow on Twitch so you can see when we're live again. Otherwise, if you're watching later on YouTube or Spotify, you can follow on there too. And lastly, all of our Twitters are on the screen as well. So yeah, you can follow us all directly. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening.